Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. You can always check out their website, fullpresscoverage.com, to find this podcast, other great podcasts, lots of articles, and other fantastic pieces of content. And you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. Type it in right on your podcast app that comes with every iPhone. You don't even have to download a special app. It's right there for you. And you can find us there. And you can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/JetStryer. For your visual enjoyment, I've added a new John Havilchek bobblehead. I went to my dad's this weekend because my sister was in town. And I had a bobblehead collection when I was younger. I vaguely remembered it. And I have a lot of good sports ones. So maybe I'll just periodically just be adding more and more, Sap. I have good like pop culture ones too, but I feel like the sports ones fit a little bit better. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to have an Eminem or Mr. Bill from Saturday Night Live on here, or Uncle Sam, but I have them in case we ever need them.
As long as you don't have Son of Sam, Uncle Sam is fine.
Don't have him.
No, you don't want Son of Sam. And then I'm just in front of a blue curtain or a blue tablecloth or whatever the hell is behind me. We'll be changing colors as we go along.
Look at me. I'm constantly adding. I've changed this back here. I've got this lookalike of me. I got Oregon helmets. I got a bobblehead. All you've added is a blue tablecloth.
A blue tablecloth. That's exactly what I have. And it's not even a real tablecloth. It's one of those disposable tablecloths that you use at a picnic. And then when you're all done, you just pick it up and throw it away. So that's what we got behind me, because I spare no expenses.
I'll say you've given great life and purpose to this tablecloth that was destined to be thrown away after a picnic, and instead you've made it famous.
I'm all about recycling, Jet. You know, we have a picnic and then I come back and do a podcast. So that's the way I roll.
You know, if you're spiritual or like a Buddhist or something like that, you believe everything has, its own energy and life. And I think you've made this tablecloth very happy.
Yes, it has the afterlife. After it served its purpose at the picnic, it's now serving its purpose here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's probably a big basketball fan. Otherwise it would never got to experience basketball.
It would have fallen on me already.
So right before the show, and I'm talking right before we're recording this, just a couple minutes ago, news broke that Jaylen Brown is done for the season. He's got a torn ligament in his wrist, and he's going to have surgery on it. So mercifully for him, he might be the luckiest person in America. The Celtics season is over for him. He doesn't have to endure any more of this. Should be good to go for next season. I mean, just a wrist surgery doesn't seem like it's career threatening or anything that's that bad, but it's just another kick in the testes that has been the 2020-2021 Boston Celtics season, Sap.
Yeah, let's hope he recovers quicker than Romeo Langford recovered, because he had a wrist issue last year, and it seemed to take him forever to recover. I would expect Jaylen Brown to be back 100% when training camp opens, which it should be more of a regular season next year, with the season kicking off maybe the middle or end of October, maybe early November. They're still going to have to play with those dates, because the NBA season is going to last till the middle of July this year.
Yeah.
That's when the finals will be. So you keep moving the schedule a little bit to give these guys a little bit more of a break. It's just really sad news, because Jaylen Brown, having his best year, finally made it to an all-star game in his fifth year with the Boston Celtics. I think he was trying to develop himself as a leader. He's one of my favorite players in the league, more for what he does off the court than on the court. I think he's one of the brightest guys in the league. He's already a vice president inside the Players Union, the youngest vice president ever. He's a really smart guy, socially active. And it just seems like this has been a cursed season for the Celtics. Now, they have themselves to blame for a lot of this, because there's games where they just don't show up. And we saw that yesterday against the Miami Heat when they allowed 79 points in the first half. That's not being cursed. That's just not being good or being engaged or really caring. That was really embarrassing to give up 79 points. Now, Miami's a good team that matches up really well against the Celtics, but 79 points, that's essentially 40 points per quarter. I could see an NBA team having one quarter once in a while of 40 points, but not an average of that and a half. So that kind of summed up their season, that they just weren't engaged. And I'm sick of hearing about, it was an early Sunday game. Well, it was also an early Sunday game for the Miami Heat, where we're on the road. So please spare me those excuses. But back to Jaylen Brown. Yeah, it's sad, because he's a good guy. He's worked his ass off and gotten better every single year in the league, to the point now that he's an all-star. And in some ways you can make a case he's had a better season than Jason Tatum. I think he's a little more consistent than Tatum, a little bit more intense than Tatum. But then again, just about everybody in the league appears more intense than Jason Tatum. But he'll recover, and let's hope he's back here next year, because if they blow this thing up, he's going to be a player that other teams are going to look for to try to acquire, because he's young. He's under contract for several more years at a reasonable price. So, he may be someone that other teams are looking for. If I'm the Celtics, you got to make other moves before you let go of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Those are foundational pieces, and you don't really find players like that often. I don't think they're as good as a lot of, green teamers think they are, but they're all-stars, and that's a good starting point.
Here's my concern about this injury now is that, there was no reason to watch the Celtics anyways. And I've been saying, Sap, for 4 months, that they're going to lose in the first round. My concern is this gives them a baked-in excuse, and not in terms of they were going to lose either way, but I don't want the narrative to be, let's run this back one more year with Brad Stevens because, hey, we didn't have Jaylen Brown in the playoffs, or the team can fall back and say, we would have performed a lot better if we had Jaylen Brown. There's absolutely no reason to believe that, no evidence to point to them having a successful postseason, and now their odds of having a successful postseason are even lower where they were, which was like 0.0001%. Basically, their only chance of having success in the postseason was if every other team got hurt. So I'm concerned that this is going to be an excuse amongst Celtics media and some Celtics fans, and especially Celtics ownership and front office, to let Brad Stevens off the hook and let this roster off the hook and Danny Ainge off the hook for what's been a miserable season. And, you hear that refrain over and over again. They've been to the conference finals 3 out of the past 4 years. Well, by the time this season's over, it'll be 3 out of the past 5 years. And I said this on Twitter, the more meaningful thing to me is 2 of the past 3 years have ended, because I'm saying this one's going to end, in disappointment and underachieving. We've talked about the Kyrie team from 2 years ago that lost to the Bucks in the second round in 5 games. And that roster, Sap, you've laid out on Twitter and on the show too, was extremely talented. So I look at that as much more indicative of where this team is and what they really are, is that 2 of the past 3 years have been extremely disappointing. Again, this year's going to end in disappointment and underachieving. And 3 of the past 5 years ended in the conference finals. But at the same time, last year's conference finals, it was kind of funky. It was in a bubble, it was in a traditional playoff format. So I don't know how much you can really read into that. I think that you need to look and say, we've had the same coach for this run these past 3 years, and that's a large enough sample size to say if 2 of those 3 seasons ended with the team underachieving and underperforming, maybe we have a significant problem with the coach or the way that the general manager is putting together the team.
I think it's both. I mean, we talk about the roster construction ad nauseum. You look at that roster from a couple of years ago where they had 9 legitimate NBA players, many of them all-stars, max-type players, and it didn't work. Now, Milwaukee was really good that year. Milwaukee had a better record than you had. Giannis was winning the first of his back-to-back MVPs, and they beat you in 5 games. I think the real trouble with that series was it wasn't competitive after game 1. You stole game 1 in Milwaukee, and then after that, Milwaukee just toyed with you. It was men against boys. So that was discouraging if you're a Celtics fan. This time around, it looks like they're going to be in the play-in tournament. They could lose in the play-in tournament, and that would not surprise me. I mean, as we talked today, they would play Charlotte 7 versus 8. There's a possibility they lose that game. If Gordon Hayward's back for Charlotte and LaMelo Ball is back playing, and you've got Terry Rozier, who's, obviously got an axe to grind with the Celtics. They could lose that game, and then they'd have to play the winner of Washington, Indiana. And who the hell wants to play Washington at this point, although Bradley Beal's going to miss a couple games with a hamstring. I'll tell you what, if the Celtics and Washington meet for the 8th playoff position, my money would be on Washington, provided Bradley Beal's out there even on one leg, because I'll tell you what, Russell Westbrook's going to bring it that particular night. I don't know if the Celtics will bring it that particular night because they're so inconsistent. I mean, that was the biggest game of the regular season. Sunday, hosting Miami with a chance to get to the 6th seed and avoid that crazy play-in tournament, and they were down 79-53 at the half, and Miami toyed with them. And I respect Miami. I think they're a better team than the Celtics. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go roster to roster. Miami does have professionals. They've got someone in Jimmy Butler who at this stage in his career makes his teammates better. The Celtics don't have a player like that. Miami's extremely well coached. They abused Kemba Walker on the defensive end. And, Bam Adebayo normally has big games against the Celtics, and yesterday was no different. So I think Miami's better than the Celtics. I thought they were last year. The pieces fit better in Miami than they do in Boston. Boston at times looks really good, but at times looks really bad.
Yeah, Miami's has a better coach. I think Spoelstra has proven to coach circles around Brad Stevens. I know that's hard for a lot of Celtics media to admit, but that's the truth. They're certainly a lot deeper. We've talked about this plenty with the Celtics. Yep. They have little to no depth on their team at all. And yeah, they're, like you said, Sap, they're constructed better. I don't necessarily know that, their top end talent, you could say Brown and Tatum versus Adebayo and Butler, sort of take your pick. I don't think it's definitive one way or the other. But the Heat are certainly a more cohesive team, and they've had a disappointing year too. But
right.
They have at least veterans that are going to try hard. And if the Celtics are in that play-in scenario, which seems incredibly likely, yeah, sure, it would be hard to picture them bringing it because, what's the motivation? They're going to get absolutely destroyed in the first round by one of those top 3 seeds in the East. It does seem like an invitational for those teams, and the Celtics would be ripe for the picking, especially now without Jaylen Brown. They have basically one guy who can score, and he comes and goes sort of mentally as he pleases. And yeah, they're in a bad way. Frankly, what they deserve, Sap, is to lose in this play-in situation and be out of the playoffs. That's the way they've played all year long. And so why would you expect it to be anything different? I'm kind of hoping that they don't, because I think that would at least ignite the fan base and maybe ownership to make some significant changes. I'm not talking about, tinkering with the roster a little bit. I'm talking about major overhauls with the roster, a new coach and a new general manager. I want big changes, Sap. I don't want just, trying to get a little bit more bench pieces here, supplemental guy here, maybe add a new assistant coach to the staff. I think they need massive changes on those 3 fronts: coaching, roster tinkering, and general manager. They need to make some wholesale changes if they want to change the trajectory of where it's going, because when 2 of 3 years the team vastly underperforms compared to what the expectations are at the beginning of the season, there's a significant problem with where you're headed. Because the last year in the bubble, that's the outlier, Sap. It's not the other times.
No, that was a weird year last year, especially in the Eastern Conference, because you didn't have Durant and Kyrie Irving playing with Brooklyn, so that took them out of the equation. Milwaukee never seemed to buy in after the 3.5-month shutdown because of the pandemic. When they came back, they just weren't the same team that they were before the pandemic. It just didn't seem like they were all on the same page. Philadelphia was a mess at that point with Brett Brown as their head coach. You were able to get by Toronto in 7 games. You should have probably wrapped that series up in 5 rather than 7, and maybe that would have impacted the Eastern Conference Finals a little bit because you would have been better rested. I don't know. That's, going deep diving into trying to predict what would have happened.
Wasn't that strong last year.
No, it wasn't. This year it's much stronger. You've got Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant on one team that weren't playing in the playoffs last year. Philadelphia is much better. Maybe you make the same type of moves that Philadelphia made. You bring in Daryl Morey, not that the Celtics are bringing Daryl Morey in, but another executive, and then you make the change at coach, and then you tinker with the roster. You leave your foundational pieces there. In the case of the Celtics, Tatum and Brown, bring in some veterans like the Sixers did with Danny Green, Dwight Howard, Seth Curry. Those guys have all, done a really good job with Philadelphia. That's maybe the method. I'm not in favor of trading Tatum or Brown. I don't know what you're going to get back. What are you going to get back? A bunch of draft picks? And what the hell does that mean? Unless the only player that I could see coming here in a trade is if Jaylen Brown goes to Washington for Bradley Beal and whatever other pieces you have to throw in that to make it work, because that would appease Jason Tatum because he and Bradley Beal are best friends. But do you have to run the entire franchise to appease Jason Tatum? He's really good, but he's not LeBron James or Larry Bird or Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan. You did it for those guys because they're special. Jason Tatum's not at that level. I don't think he'll ever get to that level.
It's Sap. I do acknowledge and believe Bradley Beal's a better player than Jaylen Brown is right now. Brown's a little bit better defensively. Beal is much better offensively. There's a wide gap there. But I mean, you've seen what's going on with Beal in his career, and you've got what's going on even this season. He's an excellent player, but it's not like he's pushing his team into championship contention.
Right.
So how much better would the Celtics really be with Jason Tatum and Bradley Beal as their core two, as opposed to Tatum and Brown? Maybe slightly better, but it could go the other way, and it's ultimately it doesn't get you high enough to be competing for a championship. So I look at it at that point. Beal's a little bit of an older player, not much older. He's making more money. I don't know that move necessarily makes sense, other than
I
you're right,
agree.
it does appease Jason Tatum, but the goal, and this is what frustrates me the most because people seem to lose sight of this with the Celtics, the goal isn't to get to the conference finals. The goal is to win the NBA championship. So every move you make needs to be with that in mind and with that as the ultimate goal for how you're planning your team. I think Danny Ainge doesn't have that plan anymore. I think once the Anthony Davis trade fell apart and Kyrie Irving, burned them and left them at the altar, that he had no backup plan. And so they're sort of left in this meandering position. And I don't think even he thought they were going to be this bad as they are this year. But yeah, they need to address everything. They can't have any sort of run it back mentality because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. There's going to be no different result next year. I'm tired of hearing Sean Grandy say, they missed all these games because of COVID and this starter's missed time because of injury. This bench guy's missed time. Every team is dealing with this. There's been zero healthy teams in the NBA this year. Zero. Every team has gone through lulls where they've missed multiple starters, multiple key players, and the Celtics have not faced adversity well at all this year. That certainly falls on the players, but it also falls a lot on the coach, whose job is to sort of keep the team as a cohesive unit and playing for each other as opposed to playing for themselves or not playing for anybody.
Denver's kept winning without Jamal Murray. Utah's kept winning without Donovan Mitchell. These are all-stars or all-star caliber players as well. That's what you do. You've got to have people to step up and do a solid job. Brooklyn has had their three top players play together for a total of 7 games, less than 200 minutes. When Harden, Durant, and Kyrie Irving have played together, it's been so infrequent that sometimes I forget what they look like on the same court. Let's go back 2 years. How's a little revisionist history? Because we're not the general manager or the president of the Celtics, so we can second guess, third guess, do whatever you want to call it. They lost Kyrie Irving. Their reaction was to go sign Kemba Walker, because Kemba Walker was the anti-Kyrie Irving, not as good a player, but a real positive guy, a team guy, great personality. Okay, that works for about 3 months. And now Kemba Walker is a 5'11" guard who's on the wrong side of 30, who now has issues with his knee where he can't play back-to-back nights. How about in that offseason if they went after Jimmy Butler instead of Kemba Walker? Now, all of a sudden in that offseason, for some reason, Jimmy Butler was considered toxic because it didn't work necessarily in Philadelphia or in Minnesota or even in Chicago, because he's a guy who takes these things, I think, more seriously than the young players because of where he came from. He is, which I think is what makes him a really good leader, right? I mean, this is a guy who he took one shot in the first half yesterday, and yet his team was up 26 points because he understands the game that these other guys were hot. I don't have to get my points. I'll go get assists. I'll play defense. But when the game got a little closer in the fourth quarter, what did Miami do? They went to Jimmy Butler and he went to the basket. He either scores or gets to the free throw line and hits his free throws. He's a winning type player, right? So revisionist history, if the Celtics went after him, and it would have been cheaper than Kemba Walker, because Kemba Walker's making $35 million a year. Now, I know you got to fit in 3 wings, right? Jimmy Butler, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, but you can kind of figure this stuff out. I mean, there's a positionless basketball. Instead, they went with Kemba Walker because he's a happy-go-lucky guy. So they went for a personality over a player. And sometimes you got to make right decisions and go get the dickhead in Jimmy Butler, who's a winner, right? I mean, the guy's a winner.
I like that mentality. No. Go get the dickhead.
Well, you know what? I mean,
no, you're right.
My favorite quarterback's not the easiest guy to play with in Aaron Rodgers. But do you think that the Denver Broncos or whoever else is interested in him really care that he can be prickly and moody?
You think Tom Brady's easy to play with?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, talent wins out, right? I mean,
sure.
When the quarterback's not all that good or not that productive, like, say, Jay Cutler, then, okay, you move on from him. But when the quarterback is one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era, you go get him and you deal with his, personality quirks. I'm not even saying Jimmy Butler's a top 5 player in any era or even right now, but the guy does seem to translate into wins, right? And I think that's what the Celtics need, is someone who's really serious and takes losses personally. Even after watching that game yesterday, Jason Tatum, again, I keep hearing he's in his fourth year, he's young, but at some point you don't really change much. You are who you are. I'm sure in his fourth year, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were pissed after losses, and Jason Tatum's kind of like, smiling and shaking hands with the opposition. Doesn't seem like it really bothered him all that much that his team lost. He got his 29 points, a lot in garbage time, because he was a no-show in the first half, which is often the case with him. I'm tired of hearing that, he lets the game come to him. Well, he doesn't have the teammates to do that. Jimmy Butler does have the teammates to do that, and Butler has a more well-rounded game at this stage in his career. But that's my greater point, is like, forget the personalities. Look, just go get ball players.
Yeah, I get it. And the Celtics have a sincere lack of them. And I like what you said about having guys who take those losses personally. And you think, okay, well, Marcus Smart, he gets pissed off, but then he'll get ejected from a game, or he'll, pick up a tech, and you can't have your fifth or sixth best player be the leader of your team. You can't. It just doesn't work that way. And I've loved Marcus Smart, but I said this on my post game the other night, it may be time to revisit the Marcus Smart era in Boston, because this isn't working. If he's the leader of your team, and everything I've heard indicates that, then you need a change of leadership, because that's not working. You can't have your fifth best guy be the leader of your team.
No,
it doesn't work. It's never worked. It never will work.
No, that might work in baseball. Where you've got a guy who hits seventh in your lineup, but he's a glue guy and he's a good defensive player, all that stuff. But it doesn't work in basketball. No one's going to take him seriously. Whereas Jimmy Walker's a five-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA selection.
Jimmy Walker, I think, won an Emmy, but Jimmy Butler, yes.
Jimmy Butler. I was thinking, what it is? I always think Jimmy Butler looks like Jamie Foxx so much that sometimes it gets confusing for me. But Jimmy Walker was great in Good Times, which was one of my favorite sitcoms of the 70s. Jimmy Butler, a little better built than Jimmy Walker.
But yes, you're right. I mean, the Celtics, everything that could be mentally wrong with a team is what the Celtics are dealing with right now. And I think that the fans shouldn't expect anything of them in these play-in things. And if they get in the playoffs, the expectation should be that they get swept by whoever they play. So it's better. They're better to lose in the play-in, Sap. They honestly are. And for two reasons. One, it gives you at least a lottery pick or a potential of a higher lottery pick. So, okay, that's nice. And two, having the narrative that you missed the playoffs, that the Boston Celtics missed the playoffs, coming off of being in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that might really push ownership to do something significant, as opposed to they sneak in, we got swept, but we didn't have Jaylen Brown. I don't want to hear it. They need to make something significant happen this offseason.
Well, just go 30 miles south to Foxborough. The Patriots went 7-9 last year. If they had gone 9-7 or 10-6 and just missed the playoffs, they could say, well, we came close first year after Tom Brady. We lost some tough games, but we still had a winning record. So we're going to, run it back next year. We'll approach the draft a certain way. We won't sign free agents. They went 7-9, something they hadn't done in 20 years, a sub 500 record. So they made the moves accordingly and spent $160 million of guaranteed dollars to bring in free agents. And they were aggressive in the draft in a sense that they kind of picked for need. They drafted a quarterback,
which is rare,
in the first round for the first time since 1993. I mean, you were 4 years old.
They've never been drafting for need.
Well, they've never really had to draft a quarterback in the first round, because from 93 on, they had Drew Bledsoe was a damn good quarterback, and then they had the greatest quarterback of all time for nearly 20 years. So no need to go in the first round and draft a quarterback. But you get my point. If they'd been 9-7, 10-6, then Belichick could go in and talk to Robert Kraft and say, well, we're close. We got to just tweak things. Well, no, 7-9 is not close. We got to blow it up. So, yeah, if they get bounced by, let's say they lose to Charlotte, and then they lose to Washington and they're out of the playoffs. Now they're in the lottery. What do they end up with, the 14th pick? It seems like it's always their birthright to get the 14th pick and screw it up. But, yeah, at least they'll have a better chance there. And start drafting guys that are more of a finished product if you can. I know everybody's one and done, but, let's get players in. And I'm impressed with Aaron Nesmith. I think he's doing a nice job. He seems to be getting better.
It took him a whole season to get there, right?
Well, let's not forget, though, with him, he only played 10 games last year in college. So he had almost a year between the end of his college season. Now, here I am making excuses. But from the end of his college season to the beginning of his NBA season was nearly a full
You sound like
calendar
Sean
year. So
Grandy.
I do now. Yeah, exactly. And, hopefully you sound better than Max. I think you're more coherent at this point. At least you won't be yelling about popcorn.
I get the point you're making.
Cookies.
This year was a very hard task for rookies. In fairness
Right, it
to them,
was.
I mean,
Yeah.
basically they were asked to have no camp. I think there were 2
Right.
preseason games and like get right into it. And
Yeah.
to LaMelo Ball's credit, he was pretty much their best player from day one. And Anthony Edwards took him like 2 months, but he got going. Now he's the favorite for Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
And Aaron D. Smith, it took him about 63 games. So you know what? He's at least looks like a player in the NBA. So.
Right.
Credit to if that's Danny Ainge's, last lottery pick. Good job, Danny. You found somebody who might be able to play basketball without, being a serious detriment to the Celtics on the court, like Grant Williams. But yeah, I mean, listen, the Brown thing, in the grand scheme of things, it sucks for him because, I'm sure he wanted to finish out the season, but it doesn't move where the Celtics are going to be because with him, without him, they're either going to lose in this play-in thing or lose in the first round. So it really doesn't make a big difference. I feel a lot worse for him than I do for the Celtics. The only thing I'd say, Sap, is that I don't want it to be a baked-in excuse and say, well, if we had him, look what happened. No. Because Sap, you've watched basketball for long enough. Did this team have any chance to pull off a big upset in the playoffs?
No. They don't play enough defense to start with. That's your bedrock of pulling an upset. You've got to go out and make it uncomfortable for Brooklyn, Milwaukee, or Philadelphia. That's who you would play in the first round. What do they do that makes the other team uncomfortable? Miami scored 79 points in the first half yesterday.
And they're not the first team that's done that to the Celtics.
And Miami's not an elite offense either. I mean,
except the game before, you got crushed by the Bulls. Crushed.
Right. Yeah. Well, here's the most damning thing that I found out today in my exhaustive research.
Yes.
The Oklahoma City Thunder are 1-21 in their last 22 games.
Oh,
their only win was against the Celtics back on April 27th. They have won one game in nearly 2 months, and it came against the Celtics at TD Garden. That's indicative of the Celtics not being quite with it this year.
They lost the season series to the Pistons, the Bulls, the Thunder.
So the Nets, by the way. The Pistons are a sneaky upset team. They were 2-0 against the Nets earlier.
20-49 on the year, Seth.
Well, that's since they lost Andre Drummond, it hasn't been the same.
They've lost to the Magic this year. They've lost to the Cavaliers this year.
Yep.
They lost to the Kings twice, I believe. They lost to this year. I mean, basically every crap team you could lose to, the Celtics lost to this year. So. Listen, with Miami last year, and again, take the caveat of it being the bubble, you could somewhat see it. It was a surprise that they beat Milwaukee. I didn't think they were going to beat Milwaukee, but I didn't say it was impossible. For the Celtics to have beaten Brooklyn or Philly or Milwaukee this year in the playoffs, even with Jaylen Brown, would have been impossible. They had no chance of doing it. So don't let the narrative from the Celtics media or from the team dictate what you as fans should want, which is the season was disappointing because the roster was put together poorly. The coach was tuned out and didn't do a good job. The players didn't live up to their expectations. There needs to be major changes. Jaylen Brown, not Jaylen Brown. The result's the same. Yeah, no.
I mean, they've got to make some major changes in the offseason, and the best thing would be them losing in the play-in tournament so that the message will be clear to ownership if they get it.
Yeah, so, and to go off on the Lakers just for a second here, Sap, I'm sick of people saying, well, they're in the same position right now, that 7th seed. Well, the Lakers can legitimately win the championship this year. The Celtics can legitimately maybe be in the lottery this year. There's a little bit of a difference. Right. And I tweeted this out after I saw the game last night, Sap. The Lakers beat the Suns with no LeBron James. Everybody was active for the Suns. Anthony Davis went off. He had, I think, 42 points. They could
42 and 12.
Yep. That is a very likely first-round series. If Phoenix would be the 2 seed, the Lakers would be the 7 seed, and the Lakers should be favored in that series. I don't care what the seeding is. I don't care what the records are. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, they should be expected to beat that Phoenix Suns team. And I think last night, without LeBron, is a pretty good indication that they can do it.
After last night, they're now the betting favorite to win the Western Conference because Anthony Davis, the last 2 games, has put up 78 points in 80 minutes, 24 rebounds. He looks like Anthony Davis again. LeBron practiced today and came out of practice feeling really positive about his situation with his ankle. In fact, you saw Anthony Davis after the game last night kind of giving a little smile and a smirk like, don't worry about LeBron. He'll be fine for the postseason.
Right.
So if you have those two guys fully healthy or at least close to 100% and fully rested, yeah, they'll take care of Phoenix in the first round. I don't even doubt that. I mean, they could get a tough matchup with Golden State in that play-in because Steph Curry could go out and get 56 points, although the Lakers really defend the three really well. They're a well-coached team. They're not going to let Steph necessarily go out and get all those points, although sometimes you can't stop Steph, but they'll do a good job against them. They should beat Golden State in that one game play-in, which would give them the 7th seed. Then Golden State would have to play the winner of Memphis, San Antonio, or whoever. It's not going to probably be New Orleans now because Zion is dealing with his own injury, a fractured left ring finger, which may keep him out for the rest of the year. But
they'd be smart Lakers, just to keep him out. Why?
I would too at this point. Bother? Yeah, why try to aggravate it or whatever the case may be? And again, they'll get back into the draft lottery. Look, if one of these teams that just miss out, whether it's the Celtics or New Orleans or whoever, gets lucky and moves up in the draft, then you can add a quality player.
Yeah, so the Lakers are, I think, trending in the right direction, and the Celtics are obviously headed in the wrong direction. And again, this is about narrative, Sap. I don't let the media narrative of the Suns have been great this year and the Lakers have struggled this year, and look at the seeding fool you. The Lakers should and are the favorites in that series against the Suns and should be the favorites to come out of the West. I favor them still against the Clippers. I do think that's the only team in the West that could beat the Lakers. I still would favor the Lakers, but I do think the Clippers actually could do it. I don't think the Suns can. I don't think Utah can. I don't think Denver can. And and I don't even know who the hell else they would potentially even play. Portland, they can't do it either. We saw that last year. The one threat to the Lakers in the West are the Clippers. It's not the Suns. It's not the Jazz. It doesn't matter where Lakers are seated. So, and you and I have been talking about this for months. So again, this is about narrative. Don't let the narrative fool you into what the actual truth is that the Lakers should still be considered the favorites in the West. I don't have them as my title favorites. I've said this for a month now. I have Brooklyn, but I think the Lakers are still going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, with those two guys, everything else will fall into place because I think they have a pretty deep roster, and now you've got people playing the roles they're more comfortable with, whether it's KCP giving you some good defense and ability to shoot 3-pointers. I still don't know how Andre Drummond's going to fit in. Sometimes it appears like he's in the way, because there's nothing worse for LeBron James or LeBron James' team is to have the middle clogged too much because that's where he's driving to the basket and he can either take it to the cup or kick it out the 3-point shooter. So Drummond's going to have to learn how to play with LeBron. They haven't played together much at all, just 2 games a week and a half ago. So that's going to be worked out. But yeah, I still have confidence in the Lakers, mostly because Anthony Davis, the last 2 games has looked like Anthony Davis from the playoffs a year ago, where he was the second best player in the playoffs behind only LeBron James. And the reports are that LeBron is feeling better about that ankle. And if that's the case, then they're going to be a real tough team to beat.
Yeah, I mean, if Davis is healthy and LeBron's healthy, ultimately, what do you really need out of Andre Drummond? I mean, just to sort of get rebounds and stay out of the way. I mean, it's not like you need him to go out and get you 20 points.
No,
he's a role player now. I mean, he was the man in Cleveland and in Detroit, but he is a role player. I mean, really, they have him. They want him to do something specific. Just rebound. Don't have to worry about scoring. Don't have to worry too much about defense. Just do what you do best. Rebound the ball. Give it to LeBron. Let him figure out the rest.
Get out of the way.
Right. Get out. Exactly. They should write that down in the Lakers locker room. Get ball. Give to LeBron. Get out of the way.
He'll figure it out.
Every team he's been on. That should be the
pretty
rule.
much that's it. Get LeBron the ball. If he doesn't get the rebound himself and get the hell out of the way, he'll figure it out. It's like when Jordan went to play minor league baseball. It's like, give him a bat, he'll figure it out. These guys are, really good at what they do. Jordan, not so much in baseball. You get the point, though. These guys are the best that have ever played this sport.
No, it's more like in football. Like you have the great wide receivers. Like just throw him the ball. He'll in open space. He'll figure out the rest. Or you just hand the ball off to Keyshawn Johnson. Give me the damn ball. Just hand the ball off to Barry Sanders. Everybody, don't worry about it. He's got the rest. So that's the same mentality for LeBron. Seriously, I mean, literally, the Lakers just have to make sure that they don't screw it up for him. and they should be able to get to the finals. And then I
Yep.
still have Brooklyn, but I like where the Lakers are headed. I think that win over Phoenix gives them a lot of confidence and puts the fear of God in Phoenix, because they go, holy crap, we just got kind of throttled by this team that didn't even have their best player. We had everybody.
Yeah, and they're still trying to chase Utah for the 1 seed. And look, Phoenix doesn't appear to take any games off. That's the culture they've built there with Chris Paul and Monty Williams. Monty is their head coach, and Booker's an outstanding player. DeAndre Ayton, the rest of the role players have really filled in. So it's not like Phoenix is mailing it in at any time soon. I think Phoenix and Utah have been the two teams in this league that pretty much every night they bring it. They've had to. They're not quite as talented as those elite teams. They have the 2 best records in basketball. Something had to be
because of that
for them to get there. Right. Yeah. They're like the Atlanta Hawks were 5 years ago. They end up winning over 60 games, and then they run into LeBron and get
doesn't
swept.
work in the playoffs.
No, it doesn't. It does not.
And so, with the Lakers, the advantage is every time they step on the court, they're likely going to they will have always the best player. And most of the times they'll have the second best player on the court too. So when you can do that, you're in pretty good shape to start off a series, no matter what. That's why, I give the Clippers a shot, because I think Kawhi is a little bit better than Anthony Davis. So they have the second best player on the Clippers.
Right.
With Brooklyn, every time they're stepping onto the court, they have the best player in the East in Kevin Durant. And then oftentimes they'll have the second best player in James Harden or Kyrie Irving, the third best player. Pick your poison. It's really daunting to match up when teams can bring out 2 superstar level players.
In the case of the Lakers, they play really well together too. It's not a weird fit. Like sometimes you'll see, look, even LeBron and Dwayne Wade, their first year, it was kind of a tough fit. They had to kind of learn their roles. With LeBron and Anthony Davis, man, that thing fits. It fits like the way it fit with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It just worked. It didn't always work right away with Kobe and Shaq. Then it worked. But let's not forget, when Kobe and Shaq hooked up, Kobe was just out of high school. So he was, learning the game himself. But that's what makes them so damn scary. And that's what makes Brooklyn scary, because those 3 guys together, they fit together. And a lot of that is because Durant is generally easy to play with. He doesn't dominate the ball. He can score without much effort, without dribbling a lot. I mean, he's not, he's not quite Klay Thompson, who will score 51 on 7 dribbles. I think he did that one game a few years ago, Golden State, but he's such an efficient scorer that, things work out together. Harden can be tough to play with because he is ball dominant, but I give Harden a lot of credit. This year with Brooklyn, he's really changed his game to the point where it's really enhanced Durant and Irving. And when needed, Harden's been able to take over when he's had to.
Yeah. No, that's why they have a good record, is because the fit is good. And that's why the Lakers won the title last year, is because Davis and LeBron is a perfect fit. I mean, LeBron, as much as I criticize him and don't necessarily like parts of his personality, he is a basketball genius. And he specifically said, that's the guy I want on my team, to Anthony Davis, and made it happen. He identified the guy he thought his game would fit best with. He probably picked the guy his game would fit best with in the entire league. I mean, really, can you think of a much better fit to put next to him than Anthony Davis?
No, because Davis is comfortable being the number 2 guy too. I mean, Kyrie Irving and LeBron, that was a dynamic duo, but Kyrie thought he was better than LeBron, at least as equal, which is insane. Yeah, he did. So that's a problem.
Does.
Still does. Still thinks he's the, best player in the world, which I guess, a lot of guys maybe deep in their recesses think that, but you don't really verbalize that. And look, LeBron's the best player in the world. He has been for 12, 15 years, whatever, how long a period of time. But Anthony Davis is the perfect number 2. It was like Pippen and Jordan. Pippen was perfect being Robin. The personality was perfect. It's more of a personality thing than a talent thing. Look, Anthony Davis, talent-wise, is one of the 5 or 6 best players in the world. He's certainly good enough to be the best player on a championship caliber team, talent-wise, not as a leader, not as a dependable guy because he's not durable. But as a talent, yes, he certainly qualifies as a lead dog, but he's in the perfect situation. He's the number 2 guy to the player in the league that is the most scrutinized. If they win the title, it's going to be because of LeBron. If they don't go all the way, who's going to get blamed. So that's a perfect spot for Anthony Davis to be in.
Yeah. So before we wrap up the show, Sap, something interesting I saw over the weekend was outside of basketball. DK Metcalf, the star wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, he decided, I mean, we know what a freak athlete he is. He decided to try his hand at track and field, sprinting. He ran the 100-meter dash, and he did it in a respectable 10.37 seconds, which is, world class, but that's still amongst sprinters was dead last in that heat. That just shows you how freaking fast these guys are. I mean, he's running 100 meters in just a shade over 10 seconds, and that's considered slow for world-class sprinters.
Right.
But it got me to thinking, Sap, who in the NBA could try their hand at something like this and stand the best chance to put up a similar number to Metcalf?
I think if we asked this question 5 or 6 years ago, provided they were all healthy, I would say that Russell Westbrook in his athletic prime, which he's not far removed from, but he's 32 and he's taken a lot of hits. Westbrook, I think Derrick Rose pre-knee injuries, and John Wall pre-multiple injuries, those three guys. But right now, I would say De'Aaron Fox is probably the fastest guy in the NBA. I think that my money would be on him. If you took like the 10 or the 8 fastest guys in the NBA and ran a 100-meter race, that De'Aaron Fox might be the guy that would win. I think he's the fastest player in the league. He is baseline to baseline. Now we're talking, that's 94 feet, so we're talking an extra 70 yards. But yeah, I would say De'Aaron Fox potentially would be that guy.
Especially now that he's cut his hair, he doesn't have as much wind resistance.
Yes.
So that'll help him. Yeah, he's a blur on the court. And DK Metcalf, we think of him as this big, huge, receiver, and he is by NFL standards, but by NBA standards, he's a 2 guard. He's 6'4", 229. He's a big dude, but a lot of these guys in the NBA are big guys. So there's no reason to think some of them, and all these guys ran track in either high school or college, as well as playing basketball or football.
Right.
They're elite athletes. So yeah, I could see De'Aaron Fox doing it. Sap, who's the fastest NBA player you've ever seen in since you've been watching basketball?
Would you think Iverson? Allen Iverson, maybe?
He was incredibly quick.
Yeah, he was incredibly quick. And there's a difference between quick and fast.
Yeah.
He'd be one of those guys, I would say.
Well, it's like those first step speed, right? That you sort of getting off the blocks.
I'll throw another name in. I don't even know if you remember him as a player. You were probably very young when he was in his prime, and he kind of lingered on for a few years. Kevin Johnson, who was a star with the Phoenix Suns.
Mayor of Sacramento.
He was a blur. I would say that he'd be right up there as fast as any player we've ever seen. I'd like to see Westbrook attempt it. And you know how competitive he is. He'd probably, not finish last and may tackle the guy that finished in front of him. I mean, he's that damn competitive. But again, he's 32 now, so that's getting up there in age, and a lot of injuries. In his prime,
Sap, Rondo was extremely fast too.
Yeah, he kind of glided more than he sprinted. But
I don't know if it's sprinting speed, but he was real. I mean, part of it, it's hard to move so fast and dribble a basketball at the same time. So you're not really realizing how fast these guys are. I mean, they're moving fast while concentrating on dribbling what the ball looks like it's on a string on there. I mean, they're incredible athletes. Do you think there's anybody in the NBA who is as fast as DK Metcalf? Or Tyreek
Probably
Hill?
not. Well, Tyreek Hill may be even faster than DK
He's
Metcalf.
faster. He's the fastest guy I think I've ever seen in the NFL.
It really is scary. I mean, the defensive backs have angles on him, and he just blows by them. Maybe he'll get involved in this. I know Patrick Mahomes tweeted out during this, cheetahs next. I don't think there's anybody in the league quite that fast because, again, it's in basketball, the court's 94 feet. So, look, there's not a lot of times that even a wide receiver is running 100 meters or 100 yards. The field is 100 yards. I mean, we did see Metcalf. There was an interception that Russell Wilson threw, and he chased down the defensive back from way behind, which was, just awesome. Especially a guy that size, 6'4".
Yeah, that was one of the great plays I've ever seen in terms of just athletic plays.
It was like, where'd this guy come from? It almost looked like they superimposed him into what they were showing us.
It's freakish.
Yeah, I mean, look, LeBron played football. LeBron's also 35, 36 years old.
In his prime.
Winning in his prime. In his prime, I think I'd put him in the race, and he'd probably
he could probably run track at an elite level. I mean, he is carrying extra height and weight. You don't want to be a super tall sprinter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, although Usain Bolt's 6'6".
Yeah, which is on the tall side. I mean, you want to be. I think that sweet spot's like between 6'4" feet and like 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah, 6 feet's usually good. You said, I mean, those guys running against DK Metcalf, they were all like 6 feet. He dwarfed them. I mean, he just looked like, like the high school
Bolt's
senior
tall.
going against
You're
freshmen.
right. He is tall.
Bolt's like 6'6", but he's just speak about a unicorn. I mean, that's Usain Bolt. Yeah, LeBron, I'm sure. I mean, just think of the chase down blocks that LeBron's had over the years.
Yeah.
But again, you're only running at most 94 feet. So, you got to build up that stamina. But it's tough to quantify who would be that guy. I think right now, De'Aaron Fox, though, is probably the fastest guy in the league.
Except
so I put my money on him.
When I was doing my research on this, just to see a little bit of thing, I just typed in NBA and track star, and the guy who came up is Mike Conley Sr. So Mike Conley's dad was an Olympian
track athlete. Yeah,
a gold medalist, in fact.
Yep.
And so, I think Mike
one.
Conley ran in high school, and I think for Ohio State ran college too.
Yeah,
he was insanely fast when he came into the NBA too, and he's got the pedigree. So maybe he's somebody that, again, he's now past what his sprinting prime would be, but maybe if he had chosen a different life and followed his dad's path instead of the NBA path, potentially we're talking about a world-class sprinter. Yeah, I'm looking. Mike Conley Sr., gold in the triple jump in Barcelona, silver in the triple jump in LA, gold in the triple jump in the World Championship, Pan American Games gold, World Indoor Championships gold. Yeah, he's I guess I'm looking at this, considered one of the greatest triple jump Olympians of all time.
I saw him in a dunk contest once, and I think he's 6'1". He dunked from the foul line like effortlessly at 6'1".
6'1", 170.
Yeah, which is a perfect sprinter size. You have some of the guys that are more muscular. Like the thing about Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's like 5'10", but he's close to 200 pounds. He's jacked. I mean, he's Tyreek Hill. He's not a skinny wide receiver. He's put together. Right. So a lot of the sprinters can be built like that because, more power. It was just fun watching DK Metcalf because he just was so much bigger than everybody. And he's got such a great personality too. He's got that kind of like that Shaq personality. He's not afraid to show his personality, even though he's a big guy like that. Usually big guys sometimes can be reserved. Like Julio Jones is a big wide receiver. I don't even know what he sounds like, because he's kind of a quiet guy. Whereas Decaf is more outlandish, or like Terrell Owens and a lot of those big time receivers, Michael Irvin. But Owens and Michael Irvin nowhere near as fast as DK Metcalf. Now, they were better wide receivers. They're both Hall of Famers. It would be fun to see some of the basketball guys do that.
We talk
there's
about
some
guys
of them that would be good.
Who were, historically who are Olympians, and I know you've mentioned this all the time, that Wilt Chamberlain was at the time a world-class track athlete, wasn't he?
So was Bill Russell. Bill Russell was probably could have qualified for the Olympics in the high jump. That's why when people say Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell would not have dominated today, I'm like, these guys were freak athletes. And Bill Russell was such a smart basketball player. He would have figured it out. Go back to our saying from about 20 minutes ago, just, put Bill Russell on a basketball court today, not at 87 years old, but in his athletic prime, he would have figured it out. Even now, I think at 87, he'd figure it out.
I wouldn't want to play pickup against him, though.
He's such a competitor and such a smart guy and such a team guy. Yeah, his team would somehow win.
There's a good Reddit thread on, what NBA players would be best at what, Olympic skills. So a lot of them are focusing on the track stuff. And someone said Sean Marion should have done shot put because that was his shooting motion.
Oh, God. Yeah. You're not
phenomenal
kidding.
At shot put.
Yeah. I mean, Zion could have probably been good in some things too, right? I mean, there's a guy 6'7", 285. I'm sure he could have
anything he wanted to,
whatever he wanted to.
Anything he wanted to.
He could start training now for the, NFL Combine next year and be a tight end.
Yeah, what was Wilt Chamberlain's event, Sap? Do you recall?
I believe it may have been the javelin. Like, imagine a guy that size, like hurling a javelin. I'm not sure. Check it out. I mean, when Wilt was at Kansas, he wasn't quite as big as he became with the Lakers. I mean, with the Lakers, he was 285 pounds. He's one of the strongest men in the world at that point. He just destroyed people. But when he was at Kansas, he was probably 230. I believe it was the javelin, or I don't know if it was a sprinter. I'm not quite sure. He just accomplished so much, including, sleeping with 20,000 women, which I believe he did do that.
He did. It looks like he did a lot of events as a Kansas track and field athlete. Wilt ran a sub 11-second 100-meter dash and a 49 second 400-meter dash in sweatpants, they said, and a minute and 58-second 800-meter dash. He was 7'1". 7'1" to run a sub-11 100-meter dash.
That's
doesn't
crazy.
even make physical sense. I bet you he's probably the only person that size in the history of the world who has done that.
Right. Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case he's the greatest athlete ever. I always think it's Jim Brown, because Jim Brown was, up until recently, I always pushed Jim Brown as the greatest football player ever. Now Tom Brady's and Jim Brown's the discussion. But Jim Brown was also a great lacrosse player. They changed the rules because of Jim Brown. Jackie Robinson played all 4 major sports,
right?
Track and field, basketball, football, of course, baseball. And baseball wasn't even his best sport. But you can make a guy that big, who was that
coordinated. Look how much height and weight he's carrying to run 100 meters in less than 11 seconds. That doesn't even make sense.
No, and that's without much training either. I mean, just
he did it in
put his mind to
it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He was he was so good that the game came so easy to him that it was almost a joke. So he never had that chip on his shoulder like, say, Jordan or Kobe or a lot of the great players had, including Bill Russell, who was, a smaller guy than Wilt. That's why I always compare Wilt somewhat to LeBron as far as like the two freakish athletes in the history of the NBA. But LeBron has accomplished more than Chamberlain. Chamberlain was a guy who just bowed out of games. He was kind of a quirky guy. And he was a guy who forced his way out of Philadelphia to LA to go make movies. He was about the brand as well, 50 odd years ago, but certainly a fun athlete. I would love if we could just go back, 50, 60 years ago, Wilt Chamberlain, and have the technology we have today. I mean, just imagine Wilt on Twitter or Instagram or anything else.
Well, it'd be mostly women that he'd be taking pictures with.
Yeah, that's all right. Good for Wilt. A bachelor, never married.
No, I think it would be really fun to see some of these guys. We advocate this too, instead of the Pro Bowl, have more of a skills competition, see what these guys can do, more like Olympic level sports. I would be interested to see what the NBA guys would do with it too, especially, with the All-Star game being competitive every, 10 to 15 years. Maybe they just do more interesting skills competition, because the guys are so competitive. I think they would do it to just be like, who's going to win in a race? I know Rondo has talked about racing Tyreek Hill before, but Rondo would get dusted.
That would not work well.
He thinks he'll win.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm sure Russell Westbrook would think he'd win as well. They just have Rondo and Westbrook have a sprint. That would be good.
Yeah, Hill might qualify for the Olympics if he wanted to. He
really is that fast. Yeah, he's the perfect size for that. I mean, DK Metcalf, a little bit of a disadvantage being 6'4". That's not easy.
Yeah, and yet Wilt was 7'1" and one of the best sprinters in the country. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. As always, we are presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out their website, fullpresscoverage.com. You'll find this podcast, a bunch of other great stuff, and make sure you find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. iTunes Store, Spotify, all those places. Just download the show, rate us 5 stars. You can find us also on my YouTube page, youtube.com/JetStryer. We will be back tomorrow talking a little bit about the Forbes just released the Forbes. There's no the. It's not Ohio State. Just released their list of the most valuable franchise in it. We'll talk a little bit about the which NBA teams made the cut, and talking a little bit more as the postseason is starting to rear its head, how that is looking to shape up. So make sure you check that out tomorrow, and we will see you then.